Hello guys, so we are going to talk about HTTP versus REST today, and we are going to understand the fundamental concepts of what HTTP means, okay, and what do we mean by REST. I know a lot of people use HTTP, REST, and they interchangeably use these terms, right? A lot of people say that these two are same, exactly the same, right? But in reality they are not same, they are different. Okay, HTTP is different, REST is different, the purpose of HTTP is different, the purpose of REST is different. Okay, so these two are not same at all. Okay, but these two are kind of complementing each other. So the reason why a lot of times people associate HTTP with REST is it is actually very interconnected. They complement each other, kind of. You can say REST cannot be complete without HTTP. Okay, so it is highly dependent on HTTP. Okay, while a lot of people talk about bringing out the differences between HTTP versus REST, I would say it's no apple to apple comparison. Okay, so a lot of people say that okay, it's an apple to apple comparison. No, not at all. So this is what I want to emphasize here in my video, and I hope I would be able to justify that. I'm not only going to do that, I'm also going to build an HTTP server for you. Okay, I'm going to code an HTTP server right from the scratch in Node.js. I'm not going to use Express or any other framework, inbuilt framework. I'm just going to use a very simple HTTP library to build an HTTP server. Okay, so it is going to be interesting. Please follow me on this channel. I hope I come up with so many interesting videos like this. Okay, all right, so now let's go to the actual part. Okay, what is HTTP? Let's first understand what is HTTP. HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Okay, I'm sure a lot of people know. Let's understand the textbook definition of HTTP. I pulled this from W3 schools. Okay, HTTP, communication between client computers and web servers, is done by sending requests and receiving response. Okay, too many words, but just try to grab the keywords. I would say communication, okay, between client, web servers. Okay, servers, you can say servers, done by requests, responses. These are enough. Okay, now I generally give analogies in my explanation. I always tend to lean towards some or the analogy which is not related to computer science. Okay, it is mostly related to some real world happening, some kind of a real world example. Okay, even here I'm going to take an example of bank. Imagine you are going to visit a bank, personally visit a bank to do a certain transaction. Okay, now who is going to be the client here? Let's try to understand. And who is going to be the server or web server here? Okay, the customer, that is you visiting the bank, is the client, and the bank here is the web server, right? How is the transaction going to happen? You are going to request something from the bank and you would be receiving some response from the bank, right? As simple as that. So there is some form of a communication, right? Now let's extend this a bit. Okay, let's see how pictorially I can represent this so that you can understand it in a much simpler way. Now let's say I am the client. Okay, my motive is to withdraw cash. Okay, you would visit the bank only to withdraw cash, right? You won't visit the bank to rob the bank, right? So the purpose could be either you would visit the bank for cash withdrawal or for doing some kind of a transaction. Okay, so in my case I want to visit the bank for drawing cash. So I am the client here. Okay, and I am going to this bank that I would call a server. How am I going to request the cash withdrawal, I need to fill up some kind of a form, right? You would have seen a lot of banks, they would keep some forms beside their counter, right? And that form is absolutely must. In order for you to perform cash withdrawal, you have to absolutely fill up this form, right, in the prescribed template, and that is nothing but HTTP to me, right? It's very easy for you to understand. Imagine you are not following this protocol, okay? Let's say you are walking up to this server or this lady and you are saying, give me my money, okay? You might be holding a bank account and you're just verbally asking her to give some money. This lady won't be able to serve you because this lady does not understand what you're speaking, okay? The communication has to be in this form. It has to be following this protocol. Only then your request will be fulfilled, right? There is another thing. A lot of times people associate with TCP. Okay, so this protocol, transmission control protocol, is also used at a lot of places alongside HTTP, right? Let's try to understand what it is. Now imagine the bank counter the window is closed. So there is this window, right? Generally you see. Imagine this is closed. No matter how much you do due diligence, you are not going to get your cash because this counter is closed. I mean, you go to SBI during lunchtime, even if you carry this form with you, they'll say lunchtime, right? So that is what is TCP. If you try to compare it with analogy, the port has to be open. That means the window has to be open. Only then you can perform the transaction, right? Once the transaction is completed, that is, let's say everything is validated and the request is processed, the response, that is cash, that would be handed over to you, right? And this is the complete cycle that you have to follow. On the same lines, client, server, request, response, HTTP, TCP, what else do you want, right? You have the picture of real world system, right? So this is all about HTTP. Now let me extend this to explain you some more things about HTTP in my next slide. So I will talk about HTTP methods. Now this is more of an extension of HTTP, right? Now you already have a protocol in place and this protocol enforces you to follow that. Only then your response will be served. Otherwise you will get an error, okay? If you are not following this protocol, the server will simply return an error. The server cannot understand it. Now there can be different actions performed. Like typically if you go in a bank, you can perform an action like deposit, you can withdraw cash, or you want to request for a bank statement, you want to get the statement, or you probably want to open an account. You might be the new customer, you want to open an account, right? There are prescribed templates for it. So you cannot actually fill just one form and say, okay, give me my money. No. So again, there are set number of templates that are available, appropriate action templates available for you, right? This is pretty much synonymous with HTTP methods. So HTTP methods are like, there are different methods. You have to choose the most appropriate method from that. I would emphasize on the word appropriate because you cannot perform an action that is supposed to be get, but you are doing a post operation. Okay, so HTTP, I'll come to HTTP methods a bit later, but it's something similar to, you cannot withdraw the cash when you fill up the deposit form, and vice versa, right? So that's the objective of segregating based on different actions. Now that is nothing but HTTP methods, right? So we talked about HTTP, we talked about REST, so we talked about HTTP methods, we talked about client, we talked about server, we talked about response, we talked about TCP, right? Now the only thing that is remaining is REST, right? Now where do you picture REST in all of this use case, right? So that is where I am now coming to. REST is nothing but representational state transfer. Now just go by the definition, just go by the literal meaning of it. Representational state transfer. REST is not a protocol, okay? REST is a guideline which promotes you to represent a certain state transfer, okay? How do you represent it? You represent an entity. So I would call this as an entity as a resource. Now what is the entity here? The bank account. Now you might be thinking like, what is a resource? Forget for one moment there is no bank account. What is the purpose of your visit to the bank, right? Now only when you have a bank account there is a purpose. Otherwise you won't just like that visit a bank. I mean, okay, forget about doing performing some kind of a service which is not even related to bank, right? You have to have some entity around which things are revolving around, which is nothing but the bank account, right? So REST actually helps you define that singular entity, which is nothing but the resource, which is generally called as resource, right? Now just take a look at the number of actions that you can perform when you walk up to the bank. You can open a bank account, right? So it's operating directly on the bank account. So that means you want to create a bank account, like you would use post. So in HTTP methods, you would use post. You want to request a bank account statement, you would use get, right? But from where? That is the question. You would request statement from where? From bank account. You want to deposit cash to what? To bank account. You want to withdraw cash from where? From resource, from bank account, right? You want to close account, what? Like close bank account, right? This is why REST is very important. See how much it simplifies your entire problem statement, right? That is the objective of REST. REST is actually very helpful in visualizing everything with respect to using resource. Now everything boils down to nothing but a resource. In this case, the resource is a bank account, right? Now this is what you will typically use. By the way, I'm also planning to build an HTTP server right from the scratch. So I will use the same example there, okay? Now let me move on to next slide and let me just explain you a little bit more about REST. It's just a summary. So it provides a foundation on where to fulfill the action. So we already know about it. Recommends defining the target as resource, right? Now in the case of user's bank account, in the bank example, user's bank account is the resource, right? Uses HTTP methods to perform CRUD operations. Now CRUD is like create, read, update, delete, right? Create is like post, read is for get, update is for put, delete is for delete. On what? On resource. What is the resource here? Bank account. As simple as that. Alright, so let's just come back to the original definition of REST, the textbook definition of REST. You'll still find it very difficult to understand, okay? REST is an architectural style for providing standards between computer system on the web, making it easier for systems to communicate with each other. See how difficult is it for you to understand the definition, right? But now just pick up these keywords, architectural style, that makes your life very easy, right? That makes it easier for systems to communicate with each other. What are those systems? Clients and servers. How are they going to communicate with each other? They are going to communicate, the client is going to place a request, the server is going to respond. but that will be defined by HTTP methods. As simple as that, right? Now let's also try to draw a fine line between HTTP and REST. HTTP defines the communication protocol. It's a rule. Okay. REST is an architectural style for web service. It's a guideline. So there's a difference between rule and a guideline. Okay. You have to keep in mind that HTTP is a rule. Without HTTP, the communication cannot happen. REST is a guideline, okay, which makes HTTP communication very simple, very easy. From so many complexities, it actually breaks down into a very simpler architecture. Okay, provides a template for communication. Now the template has to be followed as it is. Okay, now in that template, you just try to notice these fine different things. Resource oriented communication. Now it emphasizes on resource oriented communication. On what? On HTTP, right? So if HTTP prescribes a template, REST says, boss, you mandate the bank account number, right? Only when you mandate the bank account number, things will be very simple. Otherwise, if you do not mandate the bank account number, that means you are not operating on resource. You are not following the resource oriented communication. It is something like, let's say you give the name and you ask the person to find out my bank account, right? It's not targeted, it's not targeting the resource. It has to target the resource, right? So that is the emphasis that REST gives you. Operations, basic request and response. So I can request anything for that matter. So I need not actually request for updating my bank account or withdrawing my cash from my account based on the account number. I can always say that, okay, I'm giving my name in the prescribed template, find out the bank account that I have and return me, give me the cash, right? But here there is a clear CRUD operations. I mean, it emphasizes on CRUD operations using what? HTTP methods. HTTP methods are very powerful. I mean, at the end of the day, REST is actually relying on HTTP, right? So it makes it very easy for REST to complement with HTTP, right? They both complement each other well, very well, right? May not inherently scale well, obviously, because let's say if you do not understand what resource you are operating on, it is very difficult for you to add more requests or maybe to add more users to the operations that you are doing, right? Here it emphasizes on scalability and simplicity. So that's the objective of REST, right? So just to summarize everything, how to communicate? HTTP is the protocol. So there is a fixed protocol which governs everything, like which says this is how you must communicate. What to communicate? REST helps you define the resource. Okay. Which actions to communicate? HTTP methods or verbs, they help you choose the most appropriate action. As simple as that, right? So given this, let's see if we can jump into building an HTTP server right from the scratch, okay? The interesting part. All right, so let me open the Visual Studio Code. Even before I open the Visual Studio Code, let me define a folder here. Okay, yeah. So let me share my screen. All right, so I'm going to define a brand new folder where I am going to create my own HTTP server. Okay, so I'm sure this is going to be interesting for you. So I defined a folder called HTTP server. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go into Visual Studio Code and I'm going to get into this folder and I'm going to initialize a NodeJS project, okay, npm init, I think y, yeah. Okay, so it actually created a new project for me. I'll have to go to this folder. So I'll use the same location, and here you go. It has created a package.json. So when I created the Node.js project, it has created a single file which is nothing but package.json. So it would expect me to have some kind of a JavaScript file. Just for consistency's sake, I will change it to server.js, and I am going to create a server.js here. Okay, server.js. All right, so we are good up to here. Okay, let's see if we can define everything from the scratch. Okay, by the way, I'm not going to use ExpressJS or any third party to build this server. I'm just going to use the predefined HTTP package to define this, to build this server. Okay, so the first things first, I'm going to define the HTTP handle. So I'll say require HTTP. Oops. All right. So the next thing which I'm going to define is the entity, okay, or the resource on which I'm going to operate on, and this is like the resource. It has to be resources because I'm going to maintain a list of bank accounts. Okay, and we are going to look at the same example that I explained you. Okay, so I have defined something, and this is actually REST guideline. Okay, this is I've defined this because I'm following REST guideline. Okay, now the next thing that I'm going to do is const let's say server, let me call it server. I'm going to create something from the HTTP handle. So there's a method that in this HTTP provides me to create a server. So I'll say request and response. So it accepts a callback, and in this callback I get the request and response handle. Okay, so this is like very simple a server that I have created. I'm going to implement this. Just bear with me while I've done that. I'm also going to define a port. Let me just define the constant for port here, 3000. Generally that is the port that is used. So I'm going to define this port, and I'm going to say server dot listen. Now just bear with me, I'll explain you what it is. An arrow function, and okay, so server dot listen takes two parameters. The first one is port, the second one is the callback, wherein this callback handle will be called once the server has successfully started listening to the port. Okay, so I'll say CLG. Okay, CLG, that's a short form for console log, and I will say server is running on port, right? Okay, so I managed to build a very simple HTTP server. Okay, so I have not defined any endpoints as yet, but imagine this is a very simple HTTP server. So when I say command J, control J, and let me try to run this server.js. Okay, so when I say this, it says server is running on port 3000, right? As simple as that. Now let's add some more complexity here. Okay, before I add some endpoints, I need to add some headers, response headers, which are required. I'll tell you why they are required. Okay, so there are three headers that I have added. The first one is allow origin. Now this is generally enforced for security. So there's something called cross origin request sharing. I have allowed all, okay, so I'm not securing anything. So this is, since this is just an example, so I'm allowing everybody to request me and get the data, okay. But you might want to control this if you have a project which requires you to secure your API server. You would add the domain that is that you are expecting to get called, okay. Access control allow methods, I am just limiting it to get, post, put, delete, okay, the 4 methods that I explained earlier. Access control allow headers, again control content type. This is also something which is needed, okay. So I'm not going to explain this further. Let me now try to grab the URL, okay. So const URL equals to new URL. Now you'll understand what I'm doing. Let me just request dot, I believe, URL. And what is the next second parameter takes? HTTP I think I have to grab it from request dot headers dot host, okay. I'll just explain you what it is, or maybe after the end of this, once I'm done with all of my implementation, I will explain you. Okay, so the next thing that you are going to do is you are going to handle the requests, okay. So how are you going to handle the request? So let me handle the first request. So when I say request dot method equals to post, okay, and my URL dot path name equals to API / account, okay. So I'm talking about bank account, okay. So just give me a moment, I'm trying to relate it with this, okay. So post, get, put and delete, okay. So I'm operating on the account. Now think about REST guideline. REST asks you to operate on a certain entity or a resource. In my case, the resource is actually account, okay. So I'm going to define a condition here. Let me define the data before I grab the data, and I'll make sure that I'll explain everything what I'm typing here. Just hold on for a while. So I'll say request dot on, when you receive a field called data from your request, so you are going to receive the data in chunks. I'll also talk about this a little bit later. All you have to do is data you have to append. So generally the requests are passed in chunks, okay. So it's not like together the request you will get. As a server, I'm building a server, right? So together you are not going to get the request, you are going to get the request in some chunks. So as server, what I have to do is I have to concatenate all the chunks and make it one, okay. So this is the thing that I was doing now here. So this is done, and now the second thing that I have to do is, once the chunk is successful, the next thing what I'm going to do is, there is this end that I have to mention. I'm going to account. Now this, imagine this is going to be post, okay. So when I say post, it is going to be opening a bank account. So I am building an API to open a bank account, okay. So this API is going to open a bank account. How is it going to do that? So it's going to accept some data from the user. So data json.parse, the data has already been sent by the user, by the customer, and let's say I get this account and I assign a balance as 0 to this account. And not only that, I have to find out something to create a bank account number. Okay, how can I do that? So I use this function to generate an account ID, an account number. Okay, now let me also add a console statement here. I'm just popping up something here just to save some time. Okay, so I'll add some log just to ensure that I'm receiving the request from client. Okay, so and there is some other line that I have to write. I'm just trying to rush here. I'll explain you how it is done. Okay, now just bear with me. So what does this mean when I say post? Okay, so let me close the server. I do not want it anymore. When I say request.method equal to post and request.url.path name is account, API/account, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see whether the URL is matching with what the client has requested, and if the action is matching with what the client has requested, and based on that I will perform some operation. So what I'm doing is I'm actually grabbing the data that is sent from the user, from the client. Okay, this is nothing but the payload, so I will say payload, probably that will be better, payload. Okay, so I'm getting the payload information and I'm constructing an object here. So when I say json.parse, it is actually going to convert into an object. Now into this object I am attaching a balance which is going to be 0. So when you are creating an account, your account balance is going to be 0, right? And now I am generating an account ID here. I am using some logic here. You can use your own logic. You can use a GUID. That's the best way to do it. For the sake of simplicity, I am using this method. Okay, I am logging something here, and then I am I'm actually assigning this account with my account. So remember I am maintaining a list of accounts, right? I initialized it with empty object, right? Now when the user creates an account, this account is actually going to be updated with that account ID. And what is going to be the account object? It's the same object that I created just now. Once I do that, I respond with 201 status code, HTTP status code, and the content type is application.json because I am expecting expecting this to be sent as JSON. Okay, and I will end it by sending the response body. Okay, I will pass the ID. So I'll say account number. Okay, so just to make sure it is understandable, I'll say account number. So I'm sending the account number back to the customer. So this is a very simple post API endpoint that I have created on my HTTP server. So I remember I created an HTTP handle and I opened a server. I created a server, right? And I started listening to this server, right? Inside this, I am performing something. Okay, I am implementing something. Now this is the HTTP post request that I have implemented. Okay, now similarly I am going to implement some other methods. Okay, just to save time, I am pulling it from whatever I had already implemented, but I will tell you how I am doing this. Okay, I'll explain each and every line of code. Okay, so yeah, just bear with me. The next function is going to be get. Okay, so what I'm doing is, wait a minute, so I think I should return from here. Where is it? Yeah, if it is there, then I should return. I should not move further, right? There's no point in checking other things. If it is post, then my action is performed. Okay. Now the next one is method get. Similar on the same lines, if the HTTP method is get, then what I am doing is I am getting the value, okay, from the URL. And what is that value? So you would want to get the account statement, okay. You would want to request the account statement on what? On your bank account number, right? So I am actually getting the account ID, okay, from the path name, and I am checking if the account exists or not. So I would say received account statement request for so and so. Now I am checking whether this account exists or not, okay. If it does not exist, then I am going to return 404, not found, okay, with the message account not found. Else I am going to return 200, okay, and with that account, whatever account I have found, I am going to return this, right? As simple as that. Now the third function is put, okay. Put is nothing but it's going to handle both my deposit cache and withdrawal cache operations, okay. You will see how. Now put is actually going to take some data. Now get did not take any payload from me, right. Put is actually going to get some data from me, and it is going to get the payload information that is passed by the customer, which is nothing but the cache. So when I say payload information, that's the cache. Let's say if the user wants to deposit cache, I will accept cache, right. So I'm actually trying to, I'll also need account ID, right, to be popped up from the URL. I'll pop up this account ID and I will find out whether the account exists or not. If the account does not exist, then I will return an error, right. Immediately I will return an error. If the account exists, okay, wait a minute. So did I do this? I don't think I need to do this, okay. Let me return immediately. Why should I write an else statement? Right. So if the account does not exist, immediately return 404. If the account exists, where is it? Okay. So if the account exists, that means it will not go into this condition. What I am doing is I am actually incrementing the balance. Now here I am just incrementing the balance. I just want to make the logic very simple, okay. I'm not getting into the algorithm or the logic part of it, okay. This is just for your understanding. What I am doing is I am just updating the balance here. So imagine I am updating the balance here with the cash that is deposited or maybe even withdrawn. You will find out how, okay. And I am updating it into my own list which I am maintaining as a banker, okay. Similarly, delete operation is actually going to be getting the resource, right. I am going to pop up the account ID from the resource that you are sending, and I am going to delete the account. As simple as that, right, and I am going to return 200, right. So this is the basic implementation that I have, and let me now start the node server, right. The server is running on the port, right. Now let me head to the postman, okay. So let me create a new collection, okay. Where is it? New collection, and I'll call this bank collection, okay. Now let me add a request. So I will say API /account, and this is a get method, okay. So I'll say http:/localhost/3000/API/account, okay, and I'm going to provide some number. I do not have the number yet, but I'll keep it as it is for now. I'm going to save this And the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add another request, add request. This is going to be a post call. So I think I should start with post probably. Let me copy the same thing, and here I will not have any bank account, right? So at the time of opening a bank account, so this is like open bank account. So I'll say API/account, and this will be a post request. Let me save this to get that reflected. I'll copy the same thing. Wait a minute. So while posting, yes, there will be a body, by the way. Let me create some body here. I'll say name. So imagine you are filling up the form. Okay. So my name, I'm entering my name, and I just want to keep it very simple. Okay. I know there are a lot of information that are asked while you open the bank account, but I'm just entering my name. Okay. Now imagine I'm going to place a request to the server. So your server is already up, your port is, your window is already open, right? TCP connection, TCP connection is, let's say it is going to establish the connection anyway, but the TCP port is already open. Okay. Now you are going to fire this call. Okay. So let me just save it before I fire it. So I click on send. Oops, nothing's happening. What's the problem? Okay, I think I messed it up. Request, where is the request? Request.end. Request is not a function. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think I figured out. So it should be on, request.on. Okay. Yeah, let me open the server one more time, and let me go back to my postman and let me fire this request. Oops, what's happening? My server actually is not working. Data. Okay. Data is not defined. Okay, interesting. Where is my data? Oh, didn't I define my data? Let payload. Okay, got it. So it should be data here, right? So server is running. Let me go back. Let me say, here you go. It managed to create an account, right? This is some account number I got. And let me see if I enter this account and I am able to get the balance now. The balance is 0. So I have successfully opened an account here. And when I request for a statement, I am able to get the balance here, right? As simple as that. Now let me add one more method. So I'll duplicate this and I'll say post. Sorry, not post, put, and I'll say, okay, I'll keep it as it is, and body, I'll say cache. Okay, so this time I'm not going to enter anything because the name is not required here. So I'll just say cache and I'll say 500. So imagine I'll say API/account and I will save it so that it is crystal clear. So you can see that the same endpoint actually works for different HTTP methods. The first one, okay, let me just move this to the first. Okay, so first one is meant for create account. The second one is meant for requesting an account statement. The third one is meant for making transactions. Now the same put operation can be used to deposit cash or withdraw cash. Okay, in case of HTTP there is no clear distinction. Now see here, right, I said put, right? The same put operation can be used for depositing cash and to withdraw cash, right? Now let me try to deposit 500 rupees into my account. What was the account number? It was 17, right? So I'll say 17 and I'm going to deposit cash. It says account updated successfully, right? Now if I go back and request, here you go, it shows the balance 500. So 500 rupees has been credited to my account, right? As simple as that. Let me also add one more user here. So let's say if I add another user called Anand, so that means I'm creating an account, new account, okay? Remember this number, okay? So I have my account number is 17. Now I created another account number and it spit out another account number for me, okay? Now let me see if I request Anand's bank account. Anand's bank account has been created successfully and he has a bank balance 0, right? Let's say if he wants to add some cash here, okay, 500 rupees that has been added to his account. Now again let's go to the get and you see 500. Now let me add more, okay? So let me say 1247, some random value. I am adding more cash, okay, to this account. It says account updated successfully, and let's say if I pull this up, it is able to add to my balance, right? Let me decrement it. So imagine I am withdrawing some amount from this. So imagine I am withdrawing 247. So I will say minus, okay? Again, this is for simplicity. Things are not done this way. This is just to make you understand how things work, okay? So cash minus 247 is something I want to withdraw 247 from my account, from Anand's account, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm firing a request now. Let me go back to this and let me see the amount is decremented now, right? So see how beautiful it is, right? And it is all based on this analogy. So you personally visiting a bank, we managed to kind of convert everything into a software representation, and we provided a software solution to this real world problem, right? So this is the beauty of things that I appreciate. I always believe in giving analogies, and if you start implementing everything using analogy, I think things will be very easy. I'm telling you, understanding a software concept is not very easy if you do not relate it with analogy, suitable analogies, right? I always emphasize on relating it with real world operation, because at the end of the day, even if you are visiting a bank personally, even if there are no software systems involved, there is definitely some sort of a system that is kind of enforced on the operation that you are doing. Everywhere you go, like let's say you go to a kirana shop, you go to a very small shop, a petty shop, right? Even there are some systems that are enforced based on which you are operating on. So you just take that analogy, start applying those to your software concepts. I tell you what, you will find all of the complex topics very, very interesting, and you will be able to understand it in a much simpler way than how you have been able to understand now, right? This was my objective, to kind of teach you how things work, and I hope I managed to teach you the differences, the nuances between HTTP, REST, HTTP methods. We have implemented a server. Maybe there's one more thing before I end this. I would want to just call out. Yeah, let me jump into get account. All right, so let me put this into a browser. So I have, let me just fire a get call from my browser and see what it, see how it looks like. Okay, so I managed to get the account balance statement for Anand, and if you see very closely, I mean, let me just go to the request header and let me click on raw. Let me copy this entire thing. Okay, this is how HTTP looks like. Okay, if you see here, it says get API account. Remember REST. Okay, REST targets account. What is that account? Account ID. HTTP, and this is the version. Okay, so 1.1 version. I'm using just the basic version of HTTP, and it has my browser actually added a lot of stuff here. See, so this is all added by my browser, which is nothing but the Chrome browser, right? It also added a host. Remember I told you about host. Okay, so I think I should explain about the host. At the start of my code, I grabbed the URL from the host, from request headers host. This is how I am making a comparison, right? I'm trying to match the path name, right? This is the actual host. Host is nothing but the domain. Okay, so it is actually getting from the domain and it is appending, this is the underlying URL, right? And it is appending the path, further path, right? Now this is how a typical HTTP Hypertext Transfer Protocol text looks like. This is the request header, by the way. There's going to be a payload also, which you can see in Postman curl request. You might have heard about curl. So curl, okay, interesting. So looks like it does not have any parameters here. Okay, maybe that is masking everything, but it actually has a location. Okay, so not this one. I think I should look at something that has got data. Yeah, here you go. So curl has a header called content type application JSON and the cache, I mean the data that I provided, right? So this is how it looks like, and this is the data I am capturing into my server. So if you take a look at the server, this is the data I am capturing. Okay, so every time I get the data, again the transfer actually happens via chunk. So that's the reason why I am you would see that somewhere here. So I think chunk something. Okay, interesting. I did not see that somewhere. I remember seeing that, but yeah, so every time I receive the data, it would be chunked. Okay, all right, so this is what I wanted to talk about in today's video. I look forward to uploading more videos like this, more interesting videos. I don't mind sharing the code with you all. I don't mind doing a coding session with you all, so that you can understand the concept in a little bit more detailed manner, right? Just do me a favor, if you think that this video is interesting, this tutorial is interesting, please subscribe to my channel. Please share with your friends or people who need to understand concepts like these, to be broken down into very simple analogies. And I will see you on my next video. Thank you. Bye.